So I am going to get started talking about tonight's workshop on finding your best school fit. So to give you a little more context about why I developed this workshop, I have worked at 3 completely different charter schools over the past couple of years. Some of them are extremely well known here in the New York City area, so I will not be naming them tonight. But the reason why I developed this workshop is really because I was the job hopper who was constantly unhappy with where I was, because I never really asked myself, what is it that I actually care about at the school that I want to be at? And what is actually important to me when I'm prioritizing and thinking about the next job I want, instead of just mindlessly applying to the next job just because I needed a job. So I've been down the path of desperation and feeling like I was not worthy because I was really unhappy at these schools and there was something wrong with me. So I am sharing my strategies here tonight to help you all find your most perfect fit. So to give you a heads up, this is going to be a fairly heavy self-reflection based workshop. So we will be diving very deep into yourself as individuals. I encourage you to be as vulnerable and as honest with yourself as humanly possible. Nobody knows you better than yourself. And so I really, really encourage you to really dig deep. You don't have to share all that, but have that conversation with yourself in your head. So what we're going to be talking about tonight is we're going to start off talking about school culture and what that means versus school fit. We'll dive deeper into some data. We'll spend the majority of tonight doing some self-reflection activities, and then we'll go into some strategies for how you can actually seek out your priorities and what that looks like. And we'll close with a general Q&A and my closing thoughts. The first question I have to you all is, what is school culture? So talk to the person next to you if you'd like, or think by yourself. Just quick 30 seconds what this means to you, and I'll take 2 people in 30 seconds to share out what this means to them. Ten more seconds. All right, so we're going to come back now as a group. 1 to 2 people, just share out, what does this term mean to you? How would you define this in your own words? Dawn?
So like whatever system they have in place as far as behavior, as far as school goals and requirements and expectations as partners.
Okay, systems that are in place for behavior and what the goals and priorities are. Okay, anyone else? Yes, in the black.
Manifests itself between different dynamics, whether it's between the principal and the staff, or teachers and parents, teachers and students.
Great, so it's surrounded around different stakeholders that are part of the school community. So for tonight's definition of school culture, I pulled this definition from a book. Can I get someone to read this, a volunteer, brave soul? No one? Okay, I will cold call. Yes, in the front.
A school's culture can be defined as the traditions, beliefs, policies, and norms within a school that can be shaped, enhanced, and maintained through the school's principal and teacher leaders.
Who agrees with that? Anyone agree? Okay. Anyone disagree with that? No? And some people are indifferent, but totally okay. So I pulled this from this book, Leadership in Empowered Schools, Themes from Innovative Efforts. It's a book from 1997. I know, super old, but the definition's really great. It's by Paula Short and John T. Greer. And what I want to highlight about school culture is that when you're thinking about applying to a school, depending on how long that school has been around, or even if it's been a relatively new school, you're applying to something that already has a very fixed definition of who they are as a school. So if you think about a school like Stuyvesant, right? They carry a certain persona, a certain prestigious kind of identity as a school. So when you're applying to them, whatever is already happening at Stuyvesant has been happening for the past quite a few years. And there's not going to be much that you as an individual can come in and then shake up, and by tomorrow, Stuyvesant is a completely different new school. Their identity as Stuyvesant is fixed, and you're most likely, as a teacher, applying to an organization or school that already has an identity for themselves. And what this means for you as an individual teacher is, well, if I'm applying to somewhere that's already fixed and has already been established, how do I fit into the mold of school culture, especially if that school's already got an identity? Even if it's positive or negative, if it's a bad, toxic school culture, hopefully not, but even if it's a toxic, unstable school, that is still a reflection of their culture. So the next question is, well, what is school fit? So same activity, take 30 seconds, talk to the person next to you. What does school fit mean to you? And I'll take 1 or 2 people to share out. So 30 seconds starts now. And 30 seconds are up, so we'll come back now. Any brave soul want to share out? Just 1 to 2, what their thoughts are on this. Lily?
Maybe the school that, school fit. When I think of the word fit into a place, I think of that something that's socially acceptable for you as an individual. I'm guessing it has maybe it has something to do with the school that you know you could work best in, the environment of the school.
Great. Anyone else? My friend over here.
I think of school fit. I think of a place that aligns with my values.
Great, awesome. So that's essentially kind of what school fit is, but the thing about school fit is that there's no actual formal definition. If you Google school fit, nothing's gonna come up. There's no scholarly review of the term school fit, no big research or data studies or books published about the idea of school fit, which is kind of where we as Selected kind of come in. So I formulated a bit of a quote in the meantime to kind of define what this looks like. Can I get a brave soul to read that? Someone that's not Lily, someone who, yep.
We'll think of it as the qualities and characteristics of the school and its culture that are prioritized by teachers as factors for success in job satisfaction and retention.
Right, so it's super jargony, super like just crazy academic, I know. That's how I write, sorry. But what we think about, when we think about school culture, what we're thinking about is the environment that's already fixed. And when we think about school fit, it's essentially what do you as an individual teacher, when you're looking at a school, what matters to you as a teacher? Not what already happens at the school, not what's already being done at the school. It's what is important to you, what will make you as a teacher happy, what will make you feel successful in that school. And so when we think about school fit, it's really about you as an individual, not what your partner thinks, not what your parents think, not what society wants to think of you as a teacher. It is only what matters to you, and how do you capitalize on what's important to you when you're deciding if this school is going to be the right place for you. So to start off, we'll look at some data overall on retention and teachers. This kind of gets a little depressing. I'm going to get over it as soon as I can. But the idea that why I want to show you this data is so that I want you to also understand that if you've ever felt like you taught at a school that you hated and you didn't want to be there and that you felt unsupported, you are not alone, more than likely. There's a lot of other people who feel very similarly about why they are unhappy in the teaching profession, and that stems from why they don't like being at their school. So this is from a study that was done in 2011 by some national education center. And this particular chart comes from the Learning Policy Institute, which is an education think tank. And they just basically analyzed the survey data. So these are essentially the top 5 reasons why people across the country, across the teaching profession in the nation, leave the teaching profession. First big majority thing is overall teachers are dissatisfied with a whole bunch of other reasons, but we'll dive into that in a little bit. Some of the other individual reasons that affect why teachers leave the profession is just personal and family related and financial reasons why they leave the profession. What I really want to highlight is this big dissatisfaction piece, which a majority of the people taking this survey talk about. And the reasons why people are dissatisfied as teachers in their particular schools is one, they're just unhappy with testing and accountability. Schools that were sanctioned to fail or essentially sanctioned because they were failing and were forced to close, forced their teachers to teach the test because they otherwise would have been closed as a school. So that pressure was put on teachers, and that was something that people were unsatisfied. The other is the lack of administrative support, super clear, not having the support from your leaders. Dissatisfaction with the teaching career overall. You were put in a position that you didn't like teaching as far as the content goes. You're an ELA teacher, you're told to teach social studies or math, and that's not what you're interested in at all, or there were no opportunities to advance as a teacher or even give input about what you want the school to feel like. And then lastly is overall just working conditions, just salary, resources, and how your school is overall functioning. So if you've ever felt like this is the reason why you weren't happy at a school, there are a lot of people who also feel this. So don't feel like you are an outlier or that you are just one person who just is crazy. You are most likely not alone in how you feel about a school. So, after all this, we're going to dive into the big self-reflection piece of tonight, which is, again, I really encourage all of you to be vulnerable with yourselves, have a very honest conversation with yourself about what really is important to you, and only to you, what makes you feel successful as a teacher, what you need from the school community to feel successful and empowered and happy, anything that you prioritize as an individual, you want to think about at this particular moment in time and not what anyone else thinks. So I really encourage having that honest conversation with yourself. So in order to kind of define your best fit, the first thing that we have to think about is actually really defining it for yourself as an individual and verbalizing it in a way that makes sense to you, that you align with, and that you identify with. So the two guiding questions I want you to start thinking about right now in this very moment is one, what qualities must the school have? And two, what do you need to succeed as a teacher? So these are all priorities that relate to you as a person, not anyone else. So start thinking about these two things, and you can start jotting them down on your worksheets. It's the first section that says, what do you want in your teaching opportunity? Which leads me to my next slide, where I'm going to have an Olivia Pope moment, but not as angry or intense. What do you want in your teaching career? What is it that's going to make you happy and feel successful? So take 30 seconds, just start writing down a list of what you want to see at your next school or what you are prioritizing as most important to you. So 30 seconds, a minute, we'll start now. And feel free to add as many wish list items as is important to you. We'll narrow that list down in a little bit. Anyone else need more time? It's something you can keep doing as we go on. So in case you don't already know what you do as a teacher, or if you haven't really taught before or thinking about teaching, whatever your circumstances are coming into this workshop, and I'm going to jog your memory with this video, in case anyone has ever seen it. So this video is, the presenter who's speaking is Lily Escalson Garcia. She is the president of the National Education Association, which is essentially the professional trade organization for teachers. What she talks about in this video really sums up what you all do on a daily basis. But I will say the first part of the video doesn't really mean anything. It just really sets up the rest of the video. So we'll take a look and then come back in a little bit.
I'm sitting on an airplane in the night talking to Pam in the middle seat. If I think someone is talking to us, oh my God, they're so talking to us. And he's telling me where he's going and what he's doing and what his business is. And he said, says, so what do you do, darling? And I said, well, I'm a teacher, and now I work with the National Education Association. And he stopped smiling. And he said, I've heard about you people. He said, I hear you need this, and then I hear you need that, and then I hear you need something else. And to tell you the truth, darling, I'm getting tired of hearing it. I'm a businessman. I want you to bottom line it for me. I want you to tell me right now, what is the one single thing that would solve all of our problems in public schools? And I said, that's easy. What we really need are fewer people who think there's one single thing that would solve all of our problems in public schools. And you know, I wish I hadn't been so snotty to that guy, but it was fun. And here's the thing, he's not the enemy. Most people, their kids are grown and gone, or they never had kids. They don't walk into a neighborhood public school. I'm an educator. It's up to me to educate the man in the middle seat as much as to educate a politician about what happens in any given typical school on any given typical day. I mean, we serve kids a hot meal. We put Band-Aids on boo-boos. We diversify our curriculum and instruction to meet the personal and individual needs of all of our students, the blind, the hearing impaired, the physically challenged, the gifted, the talented, the chronically retarded, and the medically annoying. We make sure that they have their immunizations, make sure they understand disease control, teach them to resist drugs, alcohol, tobacco. We give career counseling, crisis counseling, mental health counseling. We get them on the bus safely. We take them off the bus safely. We provide computer instruction, sex education. We stop bullying, teach them to say, I'm sorry, and mean it. We instill an understanding of civil rights, the political process, challenge racism, foster social tolerance and appreciation for our cultural and religious diversity. We teach the principles of free enterprise, how to be a good sport. We develop personal responsibility, practice bicycle safety, and check for headlights. We provide bilingual education, teach metrics, how to be a wise consumer, exercise, weight control, how to drive a car. We teach the impact of wars, develop collaborative skills, how to tune a violin, how to use reason, evidence, protect the future. We teach them to revere their environment, how to manage their money, how to access information, how to make wise choices, how to balance a checkbook. We teach loyalty to the ideals of a democracy. We build patriotism, good oral hygiene, and respect for the worth and dignity of every individual. We nurture curiosity, we encourage a good question, build self-esteem, and then we teach reading, writing, and arithmetic.
So definitely one of my favorite videos, and Lily Escalson Garcia, she is a really incredibly funny lady. Also super involved in education politics. If you open up any of her other interviews on YouTube or something, she's the same way on like CNN, and she'll talk like exactly like this and very sarcastically to people who ask her really stupid questions. So I really love her. So what resonates with you about this video? Anyone want to share? Lily?
There's a lot of things that teachers do, but what I mainly got out of this particular section of the video is we need to educate others on what teachers really do.
Okay. Anyone else want to share or add to that? Yes, in the back.
The emotional exhaustion that could come of educator really taking on all of these different responsibilities without necessarily getting the validation of doing those services.
Yes. So the emotional attachment to all these responsibilities and not having the support to support your emotions. Yes. Anyone else? Dawn. Every moment. Yep. So for the purpose of this video, the reason why I wanted to show it to you is really to give credit to the work that you may be doing in schools right now. If you don't feel validated in the work that you do right now, I'm trying to validate that for you right now and recognize that you do an incredible amount of work for kids every single day, day in and day out. She doesn't even, that was not even the half of it, I'm sure. And she actually misses out on a lot and really diving deeper into, lesson planning and all these other factors. So because you have all this work to do and all these different priorities every single day, it can be incredibly hard to narrow down what is it that really matters to you, because you have all this other noise in the background that gets in the way of whether or not going on field trips, is that something that really is going to impact me and my career, and is that something I find important in a school, right? So noise like that can really damper what it is that you're setting yourself as far as your individual priorities. So if you look at the puzzle piece on your current worksheet right now, I like to think of your individual priorities as a single puzzle piece in the broader scheme of a giant jigsaw puzzle that defines school culture. So what that means is schools look kind of like that. They already have a whole bunch of other stuff happening, priorities that they've defined, other people that work for them. They've already defined what they care about, who they are as a persona, and who they are to the rest of the world. And then you're coming in with your little puzzle piece of like, well, how do I fit into this school? Do I fit into this school? Because we all know that with jigsaw puzzles, you might pick up that one piece that has the same size, and then you put it in, and then it doesn't quite fit a little bit, so you smash it in there. That's exactly what you're looking at when it comes to you looking at your individual puzzle piece and thinking about if a school is going to be right for you. So what we're going to be doing is really prioritizing some of these giant lists of things that you might do on any given day and taking 4 of these priorities, and you can keep going because there is a whole lot that I did not include on this. We'd be here all night. But take the next couple of minutes to really think about what are the 4 top priorities that you really care about and that you need to succeed as a teacher and that you want reflected in the school that you're employed at. So really dive deep here and think about the 4 priorities. Don't think about the noise. If it doesn't actually matter to you, don't put it on your puzzle piece and your list, and I'll model what this will look like in a little bit. But start thinking about, of your giant list of what do I want, what are the 4 things that actually mean the most to me? And what this will look like on this worksheet right here is, for example, there is me. This is what I prioritize. I prioritize a school that uses restorative justice, has a whole child curriculum, is mission driven, and has great professional development. No need to dig into why these are important to you yet. We'll dive into that in a little bit. But just start identifying the 4 things that are most important to you. And in doing this, stay away from salary, benefits, pension, union. That conversation will come later, but it's not going to be the reason why you stay at a school. Trust me. So take a couple minutes and do this right now. We'll do maybe 3 minutes, and we'll come back in a little bit. You can work with another person if you'd like, but really try not to let anyone else's influence deter you away from identifying your priorities. So take your 3 minutes right now. The list, sure. Don't copy it word for word, though. Yeah, sorry. I will talk about that in a little bit, but for your purposes, it is a philosophy about how schools and teachers works with students. So instead of punishing a student with detention for the same thing, right? If you steal a pencil, you hit another kid, you just get detention. The philosophy of restorative justice is about instead of just giving a kid detention, it's like teaching them like, well, if you hit a kid, what does that mean? And how does that impact another person? And what would be a way for you to fix that broken relationship with that person? Does that make sense? Yeah, it's very deep, which I'll go into in a little bit. All right, take one more minute. All right, so let's come back together. So we should have a completed looking puzzle piece like this right now. So take 30 seconds, just turn and talk to the person next to you. Share what the 4 priorities you picked out. Don't change anything because someone said something that you like. Keep it to yourself and don't change anything. I will walk around and see if I have to. All right, so we're gonna come back now as a group in 3, 2, 1. So who would like to share out the 4 priorities they've identified for themselves? Just quick, 2 or 3 people. Don't go into the why. 2 or 3 people who'd like to share out. Yes, in the back. Guys, join back the group. Okay, great. Okay. Share all 4 if you pick 4.
Oh, all of them? Okay. Low to medium socio-economic area, positive collaboration between adults, and a systematic approach to behavior discipline.
Okay, so supportive leadership, low socioeconomic area, systems for dealing with discipline, and then what was the third one? I think okay, sure. Solutions-oriented staff, okay. Second person who wants to share out the priorities? I will cold call. Yes, in the back.
Leadership support, inquiry-based teaching, professional development, and lower socioeconomic area.
Great, awesome. And one more. Jeanette, would you like to?
High student achievement, I put on the top, leadership support to the right, collaborative learning environment, I put that to the left, and on the bottom, I put inquiry-based, project-based.
Great. Thank you all for sharing. So these are not in any particular order. You don't have to prioritize them, but I do appreciate the thoroughness. Thank you. So now that you have the what, you've identified the 4 things that matter most to you. What we're going to do now is also dig deeper into one particular priority. So start thinking about the one particular priority you really want to dig into as far as determining why this matters so much to you. And how we're going to do this is a method called the 5 Whys protocol. It is a method for investigating a root cause to a problem. In our particular case, the problem is whatever priority you've identified, and then we're trying to solve why does this mean so much to me as an individual. So if you take a look at your worksheets, it's this big why section over here. And I will model for you very quickly what ignore that arrow, what this looks like. So one of my priorities I identified was that schools must use restorative justice practices. Anyone not know what restorative justice is? Couple people? Okay, so I'll briefly talk about it, but I could spend all day talking about it. So restorative justice is a philosophy that centers around the idea that people deserve second chances. In a more strict environment, kids who get disciplined for doing something wrong, the discipline tends to be the same thing. So if a kid steals an eraser or hits a child, they might get some sort of similar detention. It doesn't really solve a problem. It also doesn't equate to anything because they're both getting put somewhere for the same, that's the same kind of consequence, but different actual like method of how much it hurts another person. I think everyone here would agree, hitting another person is definitely way more severe than stealing something, although that can vary. So the idea of restorative justice is really about teachers helping kids find a way to an actual solution to whatever it is that they just did. So if a kid writes all over the walls, something that a teacher would do in terms of implementing restorative justice would be talking to that child about what it means when you write all over the wall, disrespecting the school environment, about respecting school space. And then to help with this and determining the right kind of punishment, for lack of a better word, a teacher might guide a kid through like, well, in order for you to fix what you just did, like what is the solution to fixing writing on the walls? And something like that, as far as determining a solution, might look like the kid spends the afternoon scrubbing the wall because it's a direct correlation to what they just did. And in between, the teacher would then help the kid identify what it means when a child does something like that and how it impacts other people. So it's really about finding the root cause of a student's discipline and then helping treat it in the right way. Quick question about restorative justice?
About that, like that example you gave, like what about behavioral redirection? So, okay, this child clearly likes a big space to write on the walls or whatever. After we clean this all up together, why don't we paint a mural or something on an actual piece of paper and not the wall? I mean, is that very similar to what you're saying?
It can be. It depends on the root cause of why the kid did it, and which is what restorative justice kind of lets you do. It investigates why the kid did it. Sometimes they did it just because like they feel like they didn't get attention or something happened the night before, so they're just acting out for attention. So it really depends. If the kid's not artistic and they just like wrote on the wall with a crayon, it's not about them being an artist, and you also don't want to encourage that in that specific moment. So that is what I identify as my top aligning priority. You would put that on the first box under selected quality. Then as part of the 5 why protocol, what you do is you're asking yourself why this is so important to you 5 times. So when I think about schools must use restorative justice practices, I'll ask myself why 1 time, why is this so important to me? And the first why might be, well, I don't think that schools should punish kids using very punitive forms of consequences. And I'll ask why, again, this matters so much to me. And the second reason is that I think that punitive consequences, as it relates to kids, perpetuates the idea of a school to prison pipeline. And I'll ask myself why again. And my third why is that a school to prison pipeline normalizes our tendency as a society to just incarcerate kids of color. And I'd ask myself why 2 more times until I dig really deep to the point where I feel like this explains why this is so important to me. If you end at 3 or 4, totally fine. But what you want to avoid is start like psychoanalyzing yourself and why like, oh, I had this traumatic experience as a child, like this is why it's so important. Stay away from that, just like very high level. And usually with this protocol, if you keep going, you will hit that barrier where you're now just analyzing yourself and your identity as a person, so stay away from that. So this is what you'll be doing, and then if I wanted to ask myself a 4th why, it would look something like kids who are incarcerated, especially low-income kids of color, perpetuates the achievement gap. So that might be my 4th reason. Everyone understand what's being asked of them? Great, anyone have any questions about this activity? Great, so take about 5 minutes, drill down deeper into one particular priority you've identified about yourself, and really dig deep here and find why is it that this is so meaningful to you.
Did you
Yeah,
Which
you would
one?
put your priority here. So I would put schools must use restorative justice here. And then my first reason, second, third, fourth, fifth reason
So
about why
what,
this is
what do you want us to do?
You
our
select,
own,
yes,
or-
you do your own. You select one of your priorities that you've identified, and then you drill down.
And why do I want those priorities?
Why do you want this specific
This
one?
one, et cetera.
Yeah, you're just doing the one, not all four. About one more minute, and then we'll come back as a group. And we'll come back together. Does anyone feel brave enough to share? You totally don't have to. It's really personal to you, but if you feel brave enough to share, I'd love to hear. Yes, you can drill down all 5 reasons, or however many you come up with.
So, my selected quality is a art-based approach to instruction. The first why, I value multiple intelligence in students. Second why, schools often focus instruction on the visual or audio approach to teaching, which is accessible to maybe less than 20% of their students. Why number 3, children are very intelligent. However, because of the limited vehicles of instruction, they end up feeling stupid. Why number 4, art-based instruction unlocks full potential students. They become more engaged and their knowledge is deepened versus just test taking instructions. And then finally, why 5, students are more prepared than taking the test. They're educated and prepared for living in the real world, for their careers, and just honoring them, just like more connected with themselves and with others.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much for sharing. That was great. Any other person? Yes.
My quality was that schools must consistently engage with and educate parents. That's important to me because parents are huge, stakeholders, role models, and key players in a child's education. And then it's important because parents who are educated can better support and advocate for their children. And that's important because parents who can effectively advocate for their students will increase student satisfaction and achievement for them and for their other siblings. And that's important because it creates more systemic change, which is important to me because I believe that education is not just about the one product of my classroom, but it's outside of my room as well.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing and engaging. Those were both excellent and super great. So the reason why I wanted you guys to do this is because there's really a twofold reason. One is now hopefully you are able to better verbalize what it is that is important to you. You can now kind of hold yourself accountable to all these particular items, especially as you're interviewing with schools. And even if I apply to a school that says they use restorative justice, and at the school I see like this is not anything like this and you don't believe in the same things that I believe, I can hold myself accountable and say like, remember what I told myself, this is what I see as important to me. So that's the first reason why I wanted to do this. And the second reason is really because now when you are applying to schools and you're at an interview and someone asks you, well, why are you applying to this school? You can now have a real concrete way of basically saying the 5 things that are so important to you that the school must also prioritize. So if a school I'm applying to uses restorative justice and they ask, why are you applying? I would run down this list for them and basically tell them like, this is important to me and this is why restorative justice at your school is such a big priority for myself and why I want to actually work here. So now you have another way of actually thinking about how to prepare for an interview and thinking about what is actually important to you when you're actually applying, instead of like something superfluous like your test scores are great, like you're prioritizing something that the school is now prioritizing, but not necessarily yourself as an individual. So it's a great way to really think about yourself as an individual. It doesn't have to be written out like this. It can be, if you are a writer, to really like codify what is important to you. You can stick it on your corkboard and just hold yourself accountable to them as you interview. But you could do this while you're on your commute on the subway and there's a delay, as we all know, and you can just start talking to yourself of like, well, why is this important to me and why is this important to me? Especially when you're going to an interview and you're like trying to really hold out on the fact that like you're looking for the right school for you. So hold yourself accountable to this, and you can use this to really identify if a school fits these values. And this weird random arrow now kind of comes into play. So normally when you do this, it's supposed to, at the end of the day, look like a tree. You're kind of supposed to keep going and keep digging into more. So you're supposed to start with 5 first whys, so 5 reasons that are different about why it is something is important to you. So a second why after restorative justice might be like it develops student voice and agency and gives the kid actual capacity to think and learn about their place in the world and how they impact society. So that might be a second why, and then you keep going and asking yourself why and why and why and over again. So that's usually what it normally looks like. Not something you have to do, but definitely very interesting and a very structured way of thinking about things that are important to you. So now that we have the things that are important to us, we're going to spend the rest of this time very briefly going over some concrete strategies for you to take with you as you interview with schools, how to actually identify if the school is matching up to what you say is important to you. So the second thing on our list of finding your best fit is after you have defined it, which you all have done, the second thing is now actually assessing the school on whether or not they align with these core values and priorities with yourself. Basically, you are now giving the school a test about whether or not they meet your standards. So in order for you to assess the right fit, the immediate thing that you can start doing as you prepare for interviews and even before you actually step into the interview is start thinking about questions that are related to your priorities, not questions that you're just asking because hiring managers expect you to ask a question at the end and that societal expectation, blah, 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 but really thinking about questions that are really, really important to you as they relate to your priorities. So for me, about restorative justice, I'd ask a school leader like, well, how do you actually implement restorative justice in your schools? If teachers find restorative justice to be too difficult, which they often do, what do you as a school leader do to support those teachers and doing a better job with restorative justice? So I'm really probing and digging deep and thinking about questions that are really, really important that will really find out whether or not the school is on the same track as I am or whether or not they're not even on the track. The second thing is just knowing the school's background and model a little bit more as you do research on the school and figuring out their background and model. Like, listen, websites just tell you the feel-good stuff of like, this is who we are and look how joyful our kids are. But when you walk into that building and you see like, this is not what your website looks like, your school does not look like this, I was sold a lie, this is when you really need to know that the school's background and the model is exactly who they say they are. So start looking at the school's presence online, look at their social media, look at the pictures they share, read reviews on Glassdoor if you have to, find friends who work there, and talk to people about how they actually feel about being at this particular school that you're thinking about applying to. And this way, when you walk into the interview, you already have a sense of who they have marketed themselves as and the identity that they're trying to sell you. So when you walk into your interview, and whether it be an in-person interview, as long as you're in the school, and you sit down with the principal, the first thing after your interview is done, because we all know it starts with them first, after your interview is done and you're done getting grilled, you can now grill the school principal a little bit respectfully, but you can still grill them, and start probing really heavily on what your priorities are. This is where your list of questions come in play. Ask about maybe 2 or 3 high-level questions that are really important to you, because in this process, you don't have to just ask the principal for every single thing that they believe. You can ask multiple people and multiple different stakeholders. So you would start talking to other people who work at the school. You can talk to other teachers, the current staff, ask them similar questions or the other questions that you have on your list. Talk to kids, see how they feel about school, ask them whether or not they like their school. Yes, question? Yeah, so if you're doing a demo lesson, you can probably try to squeeze in some time in between them to start asking teachers how they feel about things. But if it's a really structured interview, they might try not to let that happen. So there's another strategy that you can implement after the interview is done. But sometimes this could be a little tricky during the interview. But if the school that you're applying to has a hiring committee of teachers, that's when you get to ask those teachers. And you could always talk to the principal, like really have an adult conversation with them and just say like, is it possible for me to talk to some kids and like get a feel for how the school is at the end? And if they're a leader, they will like reciprocate that interest and let you do that, because that's really cool that you're asking. If there's someone who like is just like, no, you can't speak to my kids, and like, do you really want to work there? Is that something, like, what are you hiding? So, another question?
You're going to be an English teacher. I suppose during your demo lesson, you could have the kids write a short essay on why they like school or something.
Yes, only if it's like a very quick intro activity, because if you are doing a demo lesson, they are anticipating that you teach the standards and actually teach what they're asking you to do and testing on you in that, so that might be tricky.
An icebreaker activity.
Yeah. But generally I would have, if you want to establish a repertoire with those kids, yes. But if you are just doing it for the sake of your own personal reasons, I would avoid it. If it actually adds value to the lesson, then sure. So talking to kids, talking to teachers, parents, maybe potentially. The other great advice I've gotten about this is talk to the security guard at the front of the building. Like, ask them how they feel about being in the school. Is it joyful? Is it exactly what you want? Because security guards will spill the tea real quick, especially if they are one of those school safety officers. They're not getting paid by the school. They're there regardless of whether or not they like the school. So you can really ask them and see how they feel about it, and what they'll tell you really illuminates everything. How the school leader treats that security guard, if they know their name, if they get holiday presents, they'll tell you everything. Unless you're going to a school that is a private school probably, or anyone who hires their private security guards, like that's probably a no-go for that. They probably can't answer that question, but like definitely at a district school or a co-located school, ask, because they will tell you, and they won't hold back. And then as you're interviewing, always observe and take mental notes. If you are looking around the school and you're seeing things that are, to you, a red flag, you want to start jotting that down and thinking about whether or not this is something that you're okay with, or whether or not it crosses a boundary. So for me, what a red flag looks like as if I'm walking down the hallway with the principal and I'm going to their office and we're about to have our interview and a kid runs up to the principal and the kid's just like, hey, Mr. So-and-so, I got this on my test today, and the principal's just like, why are you in the hallway, go back to class, or actually like commends them on their work and their effort, how would you react to both situations? What matters more to you? Do you care about that? Is that a priority for you? So really like analyzing every little action, because how they interact in that specific moment is a microcosm, and it is going to identify how they actually talk to students and teachers every single day. And is that something you're okay with? And sometimes there is an off day, and if a school leader is transparent, they'll let you know it's an off day. But if they're just doing it and this is their natural self, that's who they're presenting to you. So always take notes about what it is that you see that's like, nope, I don't like that, or no, that was really cool that the principal did this or the teacher did this. If kids are wilding out and they're all in the hallway and kids and teachers, you see them and they're stressed and crying, like, again, all these things are important because they really reflect what the actual school day looks like every day. And then after the interview, when you're done, so you start going home, or even on your subway ride, I do it like once I walk out of the school, I start thinking about, well, these were my priorities, and this is what I saw and observed at the school and got answers about. Do they match up? And if they don't, well, then I have to determine if the school is actually aligning to my original priorities. Based off what I saw and observed and talked to other people about, if they start observing, if you start seeing that they do align, you want to start deciding about next steps. Well, for the most part, if your experience was enjoyable, would this be a school that you think you'd like if you were to be given an offer? Or if you think your interview experience was terrible, I'm not sure how I feel about it, you can decide then whether or not you want to continue with that process, or just kind of just wait and see if they offer a job, because there is a benefit to that, which I'll talk about in a little bit. In the meantime, keep interviewing. Don't let one bad school experience or good school experience stop you, because at the end of the day, if you don't get a job offer, it does not matter. At the end of the day, your goal is that you still need to get a job offer for you to say, like, this is the right school for me. Like, I want to be here. You don't got a job offer, you can't work here. So make sure that at the end of the day, even though you really might love a school or really hate a school, doesn't matter, keep interviewing, keep going through the motions, because you cannot wait for another school to get back to you, because now you're limiting yourself on opportunities. So don't let that deter you. And lastly, just wait for news. If you get good news, great. If you don't, keep going on. And we'll talk about how to really maximize the news piece. Finally, just making the right choice about what is right for you. When you interview and say, let's say you get an offer from the interview, start evaluating the terms. This is where salary and benefits are coming in. You can talk to them about whether or not they're paying you too much or too little. I mean, I don't think anyone's going to complain about being paid too much, but if they're paying you too little, this is where you start thinking about, like, am I okay with taking a pay cut for a school that I think I really might be here for? Or are you just really like, no, I want that extra cash. Like, I came here for the coin. So think about that and start measuring up whether or not the school refits your priorities. Like, go back to it, do the pros and cons, think about when you were interviewing how you felt and how they make you feel right now, because after you interview with like 90 schools, they all kind of start blending, which is why I encourage you to take detailed mental notes or at least write it out. And then you can do something that's a point-based pros and cons list. So you take your original 4 priorities. Let's say you give them a random arbitrary point value, it doesn't matter. Let's say it's 5 points. If a school meets these priorities and gets all 5 points or 3 points or whatever you want to assign them after your interview, you can now concretely have a qualitative way of, that's not subjective, it's purely objective based off your experience with that school. You can now say, like, oh, this school scored this much and this school scored this much. Based off this, you now have another way to identify whether or not this is going to be right for you. And you can also add more fancy things to this. If you have extra benefits you see, you can add a point. If you see things that you don't like, you can take off a point. And then if you get the offer and you're still kind of on the fence and you're not sure if you should take it, then you can start employing some of those strategies we talked about. You can start talking to current staff some more. I encourage you, after a principal extends an offer, a couple days later, just ask them, like, is it possible for me to talk to one of your current teachers one-on-one or two-on-one or however, and get their thoughts about how they feel about the school, and just like have that really open, genuine conversation. You can ask to maybe potentially observe the school in person again, just like no pressure, no interview. You're just going in, walking around, seeing how the school day functions. If they really like you, they will really let you do this because they really want you on the team. So they will bend over backwards to make sure that you get whatever it is you need to make the most informed decision for yourself. And then lastly, just have a conversation with the principal. If you have a lot of concerns or you have some hesitations, really just have that conversation with the principal and see what the outcome is. You're both adults, so having that conversation can't possibly hurt. If they're a leader, they will hear you out and address them. You want to give them at least a time for them to advocate on their behalf. But this right here is going to really show you how the leader approaches issues with their team and their individual conflict management skills, because if a leader's like, I don't want to have this conversation with you, or they tank it, then you have a very good idea of how they lead their team. And then if things don't add up and you get that offer and you're just like, this is not it for me, always trust your gut. This is my biggest thing. No matter how much data there is for you to make an informed decision, sometimes you just feel it in your soul that you don't want to be here at this particular school, and just like your stomach is turning. So always trust what your soul and your heart is telling you, not necessarily what your brain is telling you. Decline respectfully if you decide that this is not the right fit for you. Don't ghost them. It's not a bad Tinder date. You're not calling out the bathroom window after the interview. Education's a relatively small field, so a principal that you interviewed with might work somewhere else, and you might decide, like, I want to go work at that school, and 5 years later they're like, oh, you're that girl who crawled out the bathroom to get away from this interview process with me. I remember that, and trust me, you'll see names of people that you interact with everywhere. So always be mindful that, like, even though it's not right for you right now, don't let that jeopardize your future opportunities because of how you react in that situation. And I know a lot of candidates who do this, and it really bothers me when they just ghost a principal, because that's just not a good look and not an accurate reflection of your professional self. And then if you really feel like every job offer you've gotten, you're just like, none of them are my good fit, start calibrating or recalibrating your priorities. Maybe you're being too strict and you're literally adding everything under the sun, like all the schools must have all these things, and they just realistically can't. So you might have to reprioritize what is actually important, and just keep moving forward, keep doing your thing, keep just being strong, and keep interviewing. If you get a job offer and everything is good and you're happy about it, sign the offer and enjoy what comes next. Lastly, some resources for you all. So like I said earlier, there isn't a lot of data out there about what school fit is, because let's be honest, these studies don't really care what individual teachers feel like and giving strategies for individual teachers for success. It's all about how the leader can improve their school, which I get, but it's also important that you evaluate what is important to you. So some resources that I am going to be giving, one is just overall us as an organization. This is where we prioritize school fit. What we do is really match you to your cultural and instructional vision for the schools that you want, that we think would be a good fit for you based off what you've given to us. So we really are ensuring that we're trying to get you the right fit as close to the right fit as humanly possible. We also have a survey tool on there that will let you decide what factors are important to you, and it'll churn out a list of schools, either schools we don't work with or schools that we do work with, and it'll give you individual profiles based off the DOE's data, so you can really take each school based off that list and start applying to those schools. And then I will also be doing another blog post on this specific topic. I will also include a list of questions that you can take with you as you interview based off individual priorities. So I'll talk about curriculum, what can you ask questions about as it relates to curriculum to a school principal, behavior, all these different type of individual priorities, and then you can take those and manipulate that to fit your needs. So talked a lot, but some final closing thoughts. You know yourself best. At the end of the day, don't let anyone else tell you otherwise or steer you away from what is important to you. Keep your priorities accountable. Always prioritize yourself first when you're hiring or when you're looking at a school, because they might not prioritize you first, and it's important that someone out there prioritizes you. Third thing is just always probe around what's important to you. Don't skip this step. It's going to be the most important way for you to decide if a school is right for you. And lastly, always move forward as your most authentic self. Don't ghost people. Don't just straight up reject them, send them a nasty email if they didn't hire you. Like really, really remember that like your professional appearance comes out very strongly and it can really impact your future career. Because if you did not know this, you can actually blacklist someone from applying to your school and you would never know that. So always remember to move forward in your most professional self. And that is it from me. Anyone have any questions about anything? Yes.
If you interview and you get extended the job offer and then you decide, like you said, your guts is telling you that you don't belong there, how do you word it? How do you decline nicely?
Yeah, of course. So you would just email the principal or ask to have a phone conversation with them and just tell them like after thinking about everything and after thinking about your experience and reflecting on everything about the school that you feel like at this current moment in time, this position at your particular school is just not a right fit for what I'm looking for, and just thank them for their time and for allowing you to interview and have this opportunity and for extending an offer. But that's pretty much it. Like you can send that to them. And if you really want to get fancy, if you interview with a principal that you're like, I love this principal, but they're just working at a school that I don't want to work at, you can tell them that too in that email and say like, I have enjoyed my time getting to know you as a school leader. I would love to keep in contact with you. If you ever move to another school, I'd love to hear about opportunities. So something very simple, but will also add a lot of memorable value to you as a candidate.
Thank you.
Yeah, any other questions? Yes.
So if I'm a new teacher versus a seasoned teacher, would you weight any of these priorities differently, or do you think I have like, as a new teacher, access to all these priorities?
Yeah, great question. So I would say for the most part, for seasoned teachers, this is definitely a model that works better for a seasoned teacher. That isn't to say that because you haven't taught full-time for X number of years, this doesn't work for you, because as long as you're in a school and you have an understanding of how schools work and how they operate, this will still help you in deciding like, oh, I saw that today, not okay with it. Moving forward, nope, that's not it. And you still see that even as a new teacher, like that doesn't change. So yes, your priorities might look a little different because you're a newer teacher, but in the long haul, like you'll refine these as you get more years of experience to a point where you're like, no, now I know what I really want, and you're not it. So yeah, definitely, but at the same time, no. Questions over here? Yes, I'll take you two. So girl in the brown sweater.
I heard that there are many great websites have great reviews about school, such as my Great School Review or the Inside Schools. Do you recommend, or do you have other websites to recommend?
Yeah, so there's Glassdoor, there's Inside Schools. Facebook is a great way to see everything. You will see everything on their Facebook page if they have one, because that's where parents go to complain. You read everything. People don't play with people. They will actually tell their feelings out. So I recommend those avenues, but I also recommend take those reviews with a grain of salt, because on Amazon, when you buy something that doesn't meet your expectations, your expectations as a person is very different from someone else's. Let it inform you about how you want to approach those conversations, but don't let it be the deciding factor, because what's right for you is not right for other people.
Should we be careful about how selective we are when it comes to accepting or declining offers?
I encourage you to be selective, but as far as not lowering your standards. Don't just be rock bottom. If I get a job, I'm gonna take it. That's rock bottom. But I encourage you to have standards so that you can hold yourself accountable to the standards and the school accountable. If they don't meet those standards, then that's it. Goodbye. But I would say be as open as you can. Really give the school due diligence and yourself due diligence to do the work about figuring out if this is the right place for you, and then deciding from there. But definitely have some standards. Don't settle if you don't have to. And I'll take one last question. Kathy, I'll just go with Kathy.
How important is it to the school that you are involved in social media or not? For example, if you have a LinkedIn account or a Facebook account, I don't have either. I kind of signed in, but I'm not active. So do you think that they look at that to just as we would look up their, information on Inside Schools or maybe Facebook or something, would they look at that?
I don't think so unless there's a huge glaring red flag about you as a candidate. Like I've interviewed some candidates who have said a lot of stuff that misaligns and something's not right, and that's when I would start doing research and then find out a whole lot about this person based off everything that's out there about them. But most schools won't like look into malicious data about you, but I would encourage you to try to at least have a LinkedIn because schools are constantly hiring. There's a teacher shortage across the country. You could literally get schools reaching out from you from like Las Vegas if you're open to it, because schools really need teachers, and having LinkedIn is a great way to get connected with those schools, especially if you're just open to at least hearing about opportunities. I would at least recommend that because that's how people find you.
And the principal at my old school worked with a teacher, and she established some kind of Twitter account that was education related. So she liked the fact that she was kind of growing in that way. So do you think they'd look for that?
I don't think they do unless it violates some sort of HR policy. So if you're posting pictures of your kids and you're not supposed to, or you're talking about something as a representative of the school, then probably no. But if you're just doing other work that you feel passionate about, which can blur the lines a little bit, I don't think schools will care. It's what excites you, and it's your personal business if it's not already out there. So that is pretty much everything that I have for you. Thank you guys for sitting with me for 3 hours. I will be here as well as my wonderful team, Eric and Christina, if you have any questions. But thank you all so much, and another feedback survey, but I'll email it out if you